All right. Hello, everyone. I'm JS Garrett, and I have a very special guest with me here today who requires no introduction. I'll introduce her anyway, Miss Joey Morris. How you doing, Joey?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to have you on here today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it always is. You guys can find where we've talked before. It's always really, really interesting to chat with you. So it's my honor. I love talking to you about the occult and magic and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy it as well. So we have a couple of subjects we want to cover here today. One is masks and magic, and the other is water memory. And so we'll just kind of get into that a little bit and let it evolve organically and see where we end up. There's no telling where we'll end up. So yeah, it should be fun. So you utilize masks in your magical practice.
Hmm.
Not something that I've had a lot of experience with, but I am familiar with the practice of creating masks for a magical purpose or as a tool to be used in rituals. So, yeah, just want to delve into that a little bit and tell us how you do this.
Sure. So a lot of people talk about masks in the the current climate, and they talk about it in a derogatory sense. There's the idea that if you're using masks, you're not being true to yourself, you're being deceptive, you're lying, that sort of energy. And it really bothers me because I think actually masks are a really potent magical tool. Like looking through the eyes of someone else or embodying an energy in a shamanistic sense. So maybe you're taking on like animal qualities by looking through the mask of a particular animal is a really intriguing, deepening spiritual and magical experience to me. And I think that it can really take you outside of yourself, and it can give you a kind of a physical cue when you're in trance work or meditation or whatever to really push yourself beyond the boundaries of the kind of magic that you do usually. And the dialogue everywhere tends to be, oh, well, masks are not used anymore. And I'm like, why not? Like for thousands of years, like shamans were using masks. We were pushing past the boundaries of these things, and people have kind of shying away from it now as if that's a negative thing. And I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I think it's fascinating to take on and embody the energies outside of the self. And people talk about, horsing being ridden by deity all the time or by spirit. So why wouldn't you utilize a mask in that? And that can have different effects depending on your belief system or what you want the mask to do. Some people will use a mask, say in the Nordic tradition, there's the Helkape mask, and that is for walking through the underworld with a element of invisibility, is the traditional reading of what that mask means. And then you have other masks, which, like I said, are about shamanistically embodying the energies in which you want to take on. So they have so many purposes in magic. I feel a little bit like, why are we making this a lost art kind of thing? If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
well, absolutely. I mean, if you look throughout history and like in every culture that I can think of off the top of my head, this is something that's been utilized. I mean, we see that a lot in like TV shows about Rome and whatnot. They would have parties and they would all wear masks that depicted the different gods from the Roman pantheon. And they don't really explain this stuff on TV shows as to why they're doing it, but it seems to be for the purpose of embodying the attributes of that god or of that creature. In the pagan religions, witchcraft and things like that. Even in the movies about the witches, they're wearing like animal heads and things of that.
Mhm.
But nobody really gets in depth with explaining it. That's why I was really excited to jump on here and talk with you about it today. Um, like I said, I've not really utilized this in my practice, but it's something that I have put a lot of thought into. So if I wanted to create a mask, like an actual mask that I could wear during my rituals, how exactly would I go about doing that? Would I like first create the mask and then perform a ritual evocation with the spirit that I'm
Mhm.
attempting to embody to infuse and consecrate the mask or possess that object through transmutation?
You could absolutely do it that way. I tend to find that sometimes you're kind of working with the spirit first in terms of, right, well, what does the mask want to embody? So you might be invoking the spirit, in reaching out to the spirit in terms of meditation or journeying first, to get a clearer image of what you want the mask to look like, what you want it to be created from, because you've got a plethora of things that you can create a mask from, and all of those ingredients, if you like, will have a completely different impact on what the mask is and what the mask does. So if you're using, say that you were using animal, and you legitimate completely were wearing, say, an animal skin or fur as part of the mask, that's going to have a completely different vibe than if you made it from metal, for example.
Yeah.
And depending on what kind of ritual that you wanted to do and how you wanted to move forward. And, you know, masks don't have to look like anything. It's as your imagination takes you, your intuition takes you, and whatever comes to you in meditation and things. So the process of actually creating it is also, you know, magic in of itself, because the thought process and the kind of aligning your energy to that object, every single step of creating something like that, you're infusing it with intention, with magic, with what you want it to do, what you want to use it for, and how you want to push your energy when you're wearing it. So the actual creation process is highly magical to me. So each choice, each decision as you're working through the physical creation of the mask would then kind of shape where you're going with it, shape the journey. And then you would, or at least I would, go into ritual to infuse that even further. So you're doing that every step of the way a little bit, because your intention is going into it, you're creating, you're putting your will into each step, even in terms of like how you fasten it, or what it's created from, or how decorative or not it is, whether you're using bone or fur or metal or wood, or all these things that have been used in different cultures. And like, you know, you're saying horns and antlers and things, and how you want the energy to feel. Do you want the mask to be frightening? Do you want it to be about invisibility? Do you want it to be about healing? So it kind of embodies that kind of natural healing vibration. Or do you want it to be more aggressive? Do you want it to be like a war mask? And you might, you might be using blood or paint or whatever it is to make it more viable, more violent, more aggressive, depending on what you are wanting from the ritual afterwards, I guess, or ongoing rituals. So yeah, you could absolutely infuse it as you're creating it, and then ritualistically infuse it and invite the spirit in, very much like you would do with a fetish, or for that same sort of idea, and then keep infusing it as you're working with it. So it can be really potent because you keep adding to it. It's like a journey. It's not a one-time magical object to me. So
Well, yeah, it's something that would get more and more powerful each time you used it, I imagine. And you touched on wearing animal skins there. I mean, that's something we see a lot in the Native American cultures and Native American shamanism, and even the Norse cultures. They would create masks to wear into battle or to perform ritual ceremonies and things like that. And often we see like that being animal skins. And
mm-hmm.
What's really interesting about that, I mean, I work a lot with like the primal animal spirits, and I found through utilizing like bones and skulls and feathers and things like that, it's already infused with the essence of that creature. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
having a feather or having a skull, I mean, that's already a very powerful fetish link in itself. So simply by evoking the spirit of that creature in a ritual setting with that fetish link or item, it makes it more and more powerful each time you use it. And you're able to, it does something to you psychologically when you, it puts you in the frame of mind where you almost think like that creature. So you could definitely do this with masks depicted in the forms of different gods or goddesses,
Mm-hmm.
or demons, or any type of spirit that you're wanting to work with. I think that would really especially for rites like, baneful rites or healing rites, that seems like it would be very powerful, because when you put that mask on after you've created it in a ritual fashion, you become that entity. It's almost, it's like a level of possession. When you put that mask on, you're seeing through the eyes of that entity. You're taking on their power and their attributes, and as well as their mentality.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's something that's highly overlooked, and we see a lot of it on TV shows and things like that, but no one that I know of really utilizes this in their magical practice. And
I
yeah,
wonder if like the Hollywoodization is the reason that people have shied away from it. Because people think that because it's something that Hollywood have caught onto, and presumably Hollywood have caught onto it because of the visual impact that it can have, that people are like, oh, well, it's not authentic then, because it's Hollywood showing a inauthentic version of what magic really is. And we are all, for the
hmm
most part, pretty aware that, what we see in TV and movies is not how magic really feels. It's kind of like a shallow version of magic. So maybe the seeing it on the screen has kind of put people off a little bit, and they're thinking, oh well, if I do that, people are going to think I'm not serious about this. I'm not authentic about it because I'm copying something off the TV. Maybe
yeah,
that's part of it.
yeah. I think television really controls our perception of reality in a lot of ways. I mean, people don't really get out and experience life in the world anymore. They just watch movies and TV shows about it.
Mm.
Really know is what we see on the TV most of the time. And I've noticed, especially when it comes to like movies and TV shows about the occult practices, it's really geared towards demonizing things or causing people to develop a negative stigma about those things. And
Mm.
when you use that to control reality, if you want to, you control the perception about what is real. And so by making a science fiction movie about it, then it becomes science fiction instead of reality. So yeah, I do think that's probably a big reason why this is something that's phasing out. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I've been talking about methods of control and how fear is at the basis of a lot of it a lot recently. I think we're living in a time where, unfortunately, there's a lot of fear and a lot of control going on, and almost to the point where like the occult and magic becomes in and of itself a kind of resistance. So it's kind of like, I reject the story that I see on the television. I reject being told what kind of spiritual life I should lead, and it almost becomes kind of like defiant. And so for me, that kind of ties back into masks, because for me, it feels like defiance sometimes. It feels like a huge learning experience, which I think people are really missing out on if their one idea of masks is masks hide things. I could wear a mask, I suppose, if I wanted to be sneaky in this ritual. And it's like, well, it's not just that. Yes, you can do that. Sure, you can. Of course you can. But to me, it's much more than that. And you were talking about like the primal animal spirits. And to me, that's how this whole energy of masks came through in the first place, because I felt like I was going through cycles of learning by looking through the eyes of certain animal spirits. And I've been writing about it. So I have one about snake energy. I have fox energy. I've written about rabbit energy. There's a whole load of them. And it's the different lessons that have kind of impacted on my psychology, my spirituality, and then my magic, from kind of taking on these energies, especially the way that they were surprising to me, the way that they are not the stories that we're being told from animal spirits, and the way that it goes deeper beyond kind of like the shallow stories, the kind of fear stories to do with animal spirits. Fox is the best example to my mind, because everyone's like, well, they're trickster, so they're sneaky, that's it. And I'm like, dude, like, it's so much deeper than that. It's so much. I consider them to be like the magician. They're almost the archetype to me of like the magician in the animal spirit realm. So it goes
Yeah.
so much deeper than I think a lot of people allow it to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had encounters with foxes as well. Very, very strange encounters, and this was fairly early in my magical path working with these primal energies. There's actually a picture of me on my Facebook where I'm holding a live fox that I found just sitting on the side of the road. That it really behaved like a tame dog. It was insane. And I had some pretty crazy interactions with that wild animal that had a huge impact on me, not just psychologically, but in my magical practice. And it made me realize through working with these animal spirits that magic in itself is very primal in nature. And that's something that modern magicians seem to have forgotten quite a lot. And that's really delving into like the Native American practices and things like that. You see that in every ancient culture, like animals were very revered, and it was very much a part of their magical practices. But we've kind of lost sight of as to why. It's like something that every culture touches on it, but we have yet to really delve too deeply into that to fully understand it. So
I think again that's your sanitization though, because we've lost touch with how we naturally interact with the world. So for the most part, most of us go to a store and we buy food. So say we're meat eaters, which I am, and we go to the store and we buy chicken or whatever, and we bring it, and it's pre-packed and it just looks like meat, and that's it. Whereas when people were hunting and gathering and they were taking the life, and they would have rituals to take the life of the animals that they hunted, and I know the Native Americans also honored that sacrifice as they were about to partake of it. And you get echoes of that sort of in different paths, technically saying grace in the Christian idea. It's more about thanking God, but it kind of touches on that kind of, we're about to consume a living thing. So thank you to the Almighty for that interconnectedness between the animal that we're about to partake and things. But generally speaking, even that has completely lost any kind of depth, because we used to hunt and take life to sustain life. And that to me is very much a part of how the world is. And I get into arguments with people all the time. I'm like, just because you're taking the life of a plant doesn't mean you're not taking life. And it's whatever you eat, whatever you consume, it was alive. And that energy is then transferred, and that life is then transferred. And so we used to have these rituals, and we used to be more aware of that fact. We used to honor that more than we do now. Whereas now it's like warfare. It's like something that happens elsewhere. It's not on our doorstep. And I think maybe that is part of it. That's why we've lost touch with these primal animal spirits, because we've sanitized every interaction with animals that we've got.
Absolutely. And, whenever they would take the life in a ritual fashion, one of the things that they did was they utilized every part of the animal. They didn't throw it away whatsoever. And that includes the life force and the blood of that creature. So when a farmer butchers a cow and just spills the blood on the ground, harvests the meat, and throws the rest away, think about how much you're wasting there. Whereas if you own animals that you raise for food, by taking that life in a ritual fashion, making a sacrifice of that creature, you're utilizing the life force and the spirit of that creature. So by doing that, you are feeding the spirits when you do this in a sacrificial nature. And that's something that we've really lost touch of, because blood sacrifice has been so demonized and has such a terrible stigma around it, that it's really the most it's really the most correct way to do something in my book. They're not doing anything at the slaughterhouse when they kill thousands of animals each day, wasting that blood, they're wasting that life. They're not honoring the spirit of that creature in any way. And we're not doing so either, just by going to the store and buying the meat. But we do feel better about it because we don't have to get our hands dirty. So
Can you imagine the power as well? Say you were making a mask and you had saved the bones from that animal that you had raised, and you were using that part of the ritual of then honoring that and taking that into your magical space even further. I mean, that's creating bonds and energetic kind of ties even deeper to that animal spirit. And like, I have consumed this animal and I honor this animal in wearing it or bringing it into ritual in some form or fashion. I think that is again something that we've lost touch with. And sometimes like people don't even think to hold on to the bones of the creatures that they are eating. So again, we disconnect. Even those of us who enjoy bone work or want to work with bones and fetishes and masks and things of this nature, sometimes we disconnect from the animals that we're kind of eating or imbibing or are just around us in our everyday, as if that's somehow less magical. But we'll, go out of our way to find a preserved kind of bone in the woods or whatever. But you're also eating, and you have bones right there in front of you. Why wouldn't you use them? That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Personally, I pick up roadkill all the time. Like, it's crazy. Like, if I want like a coyote skull or something like that, I'll do a ritual evocation with the spirit of that animal and simply ask for it. And 9 times out of 10, I'll find a freshly killed one laying on the side of the road going to and from work each day. And so, yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily have to get out and kill these creatures in order to get the bones. You can see bones that you buy in the store, or you can pick them up off the side of the road. There's a lot of us that still enjoy hunting and things of that nature, which everyone I know who goes deer hunting, and most of them just harvest the meat and leave everything else laying there. Whereas, why would you do that? I mean, why wouldn't you keep the skull? Why wouldn't you keep the skin? I mean, we've really lost touch with nature and how to interact with it, like on every level. And that's a big thing that I'm wanting to bring back and remind people of here. So it's very one of a similar mentality, especially another magician of a similar mentality. So yeah.
I'm all about honoring animals. I don't feel in needlessly taking life or anything like that, but I think in a lot of magicians, and it depends which side you're on, but a lot of magicians and the other side particularly, they get into the vegan argument, and it's like I'm not going to have this discussion, because if you can't see that everything is alive, then I'm not sure we can have this discussion.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those things where we get into competition with other members of society as to who can be better. It's like, well, I'm vegan, so I'm a little bit higher than you, which I have no problem with people who are vegan. A lot of friends of mine are vegetarians. As long as you don't judge me for being a meat eater, then I won't judge or make fun of you for being a vegan. So
yeah, well, that's usually the problem, though, because vegans usually do judge. Not always. And I know plenty of vegetarians who are cool, and I know a couple of vegans who are fine. But I think it's just when in this day and age, when you say you're a meat eater, you invite the crazy.
It's very trendy. It's all about being trendy nowadays, and
there's a whole rabbit hole. A whole rabbit hole.
Well, yeah, so that's good stuff about masks and magic. I think this is something I'm definitely going to delve a little bit deeper into. It's something I've been fascinated with for a long time, and I definitely see the value and the magical application of this. And you can see that in every culture, as we were talking about earlier, except for our own modern culture, of course, which that's a whole nother conversation, and it's a lot of flaws going on there, but we're reaching for it. We're reaching for the to get back to our primal roots.
Lead by example.
The other thing that we were going to talk about today is water memory. Now, this there's actually a lot of science to back this stuff up, and it's something that scientists still don't fully understand. You do a lot of work with water in your magical practice, and I really wanted to talk to you about this because that's another subject that I feel like is sorely overlooked across the board, but especially by magicians and other practitioners. So, what types of rituals and whatnot do you do utilizing water?
Well, interestingly enough, water tends to be my most in-depth, most perhaps serious, the element that I go to when I really need depth and I need to get things done. For example, the opposite would be true with fire. So fire I reach for all the time to have quick candle magic, quick whatever I need, bomb, done. but water feels more involved to me. And so I think maybe it's because of the element, because of the submergence of it, like becoming submerged in the magic, in the energy, and where possible in water itself. So actually being surrounded by the element. So for me, big rituals of healing are water based very often. And if I need to draw things out, say that there's a healing energy ritual which involves removing some kind of negative curse, some kind of like magic that needs to be unbound, I will do that completely submerged in water. I think we talked before about how there had been a really vicious love spell put on one of my family members, and I found it. And the whole thing was like this. It was supposed to be like a caged box, and in the center was this jar which was heart-shaped, and it was full of unpleasantness. And it was a really vile love spell, basically, for control. And so for me, taking it apart, I did the whole thing submerged in water, slowly taking apart each part of the spell, and just cleansing it out and just doing that completely submerged. I also really like divination rituals for water. I find scrying in water to be quicker and easier for whatever reason than, say, like the traditional black mirrors. Well, it depends on the ritual, but generally speaking, I really enjoy like having a black bowl of water for scrying rituals and going beyond. I think it gives that kind of embiotic fluid kind of connection. Like, I want to see beyond this lifetime, so I'm going to go back into that space, into that nothingness, into that kind of universal womb energy, create a ritual around that idea. And water is a conduit to cross between worlds. In Celtic tradition, it's meant to be the main conduit to cross over into the other world. So people in the Celtic traditions would leave offerings of, say, swords in water, like the King Arthur story, as an offering to the gods in order to gain favor, particularly in warfare, but there were other reasons as well. And putting something in water was considered, to the ancient Celts, a sacred and holy act, because it was the conduit fluid between our world and the other world, the realm of spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I find really fascinating is the experiments that scientists are doing with this. For instance, they will take, water has a memory. Everything that comes in contact with water leaves a trace and an impression on that water, including sound. I mean, they will take water and put it in a container and then play music next to that water. And then they will freeze that water and see what the molecules look like. And they'll do this with Beethoven, they'll do this with heavy metal, they'll do this with all different types of music. And each time the molecules form differently. And they have also done experiments with drawing magic symbols onto containers of water and then freezing it and seeing how the molecules look differently. For instance, baneful sigils have a different effect on the water, just being on the container that the water is held in, than symbols for healing and things of that nature. So this really got me doing some really hardcore experimentation with this. And one of the things that I did, one of my family members was extremely sick. And so I did an evocation of the goddess Astarte. And what I did was I made her sigil on a square piece of paper and charged and opened it with my own blood. And then I took just a regular bottle of water. It was a just a regular bottle just like this. And I drew her sigil onto the bottle and set that on top of the sigil I'd drawn on paper and did the same thing. Charged the sigil and opened it with my blood and simply asked the spirit, after I called upon her, to infuse that water with the necessary energy and components in order to heal that illness. And I simply gave the person the bottle of water to drink, and within 3 hours, the sickness was completely gone.
Hmm.
That really tripped me out. That made me realize, like, wow, there's really something to this. And I've also done other experiments, like putting a sigil or writing a word on a bottle of water and then letting it sit for 12 hours and then drinking it and noticing the effect that it has on my body. For instance, just like, energy or something like that. And you can also do this with baneful magic. You can seriously write pain and suffering on a bottle of water, let it in the fridge for 12 hours, and give it to someone to drink, and it will make them sick. So
Mm,
that's some very interesting stuff here. And science is still trying to understand it. It's the only element that can exist in three different states, and it has computer-like memory with everything
mm,
that it comes in contact with. So yeah, I really want to talk to you about this because I know you did a lot of work with water.
mm,
What are some of the other experiments other than scrying and the undoing the spell you talked about you've used?
mm. So when I was connecting to the Ogham, and the Ogham are the Celtic runes, I was looking to basically uncover the spirit beyond each Ogham, which I'm writing about currently. And one of them is willow. And to me, willow and water are symbiotic. They're very, very close to one another. And so for the purpose of that, I was submerging myself in water a hell of a lot, trying to basically harness the energy behind the sigil, if you like, or rune, if you like, of the Ogham for willow sail. And it even has that kind of oceanic feel, like sail over something. So to me, it was kind of like putting myself like underwater in order to push myself to a realm of, it's basically elevating consciousness, but it's also kind of like pushing yourself to a place where you're uncomfortable in order to kind of push past the limitations that you regularly interact with. So it's kind of the accessing of the spiritual realm by pushing yourself beyond what you would normally do. And I feel quite uncomfortable in water a lot of the time. I don't like, for example, swimming in swimming pools. I'm not a fan. So for me, it's an immediate uncomfortableness in that sort of submersion anyway. And it really does something to your fight or flight when you're kind of pushing yourself beyond, I could just get out of this water. And water does something like it reacts to your body. And in terms of science, like we are mainly water. Human beings are mainly water. I mean, I always laugh when people are like, we're basically cucumbers with anxiety. And it's interesting the interplay between the body and then water. And it makes you wonder whether or not we're having the same sort of reactions as the water is when you're like putting sigils on it, or you're creating change within that bottle. Oh, I've got a bottle of water down here. That's why I can tell that. If you're doing something to a bottle of water and that's creating change, are we then doing that to ourselves because we're mostly water? And then if we interplay with our bodies in water and push ourselves beyond the limits of what's comfortable until we can kind of like access beyond what we normally would, it's an interesting, I think I might have to experiment with that some more myself thinking about it. It's kind of like, I'd be fascinated to know if there's some kind of like the spiritual current that runs so easily through us is because we are so much made of water. So that is why we can see the spiritual currents and things running through water when we change its physical state. So by elevating or changing the state of water, like we would elevate or change our consciousness, like our vibration, move ourselves up, is that the same thing that's happening to water as us? I don't know. I'm fascinated now.
Yeah, I think so. And, something we see and hear a lot about in different magical practices are ritual baths,
Uh-huh.
taking them, before a ritual or after a ritual. And, you don't, most of the time you hear it talked about, it's like for cleansing or a preparatory ritual for the rite you're gearing up to do. But I've found through my own experimentation that doing the ritual in a bathtub full of water can be a very powerful experience. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, so I've undergone possession in this manner, which that was probably the most intense thing I've ever experienced, period. But so what I'll do is, I'll run a bath and I'll put some Himalayan sea salt and some different essential oils in that water. And all people really do. They might charge the water with their intent, but something that I've been doing is taking. I just use my two fingers, but you can use a magical wand or something like that, and actually trace the sigil of the spirit into the water. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you're visualizing this as you're doing it, but you're actually physically tracing the sigil into the water and speaking incantations over that water. Through the vibration that your voice box makes, you are changing the molecular structure of that fluid. And then, of course, you will sit in the water and carry out the evocation. And that's one of the most intense things that you can do as a magician. I highly recommend that people experiment with this. I've done this to heal myself of different illnesses, or to undergo possession, or to simply gain a better communication with the spirit. That's something I struggled a lot with in the beginning, was being able to communicate clearly in a telepathic manner. And I found that by submerging myself in water, I was able to receive those transmissions much, much clearer.
Mm.
Have you ever done a ritual inside a bathtub or a hot tub?
Oh, I haven't been in a hot tub in years. I miss those things. I actually did, thinking about it, I had back pain and I did a sort of mini ritual in the hot tub. Yes, hot tubs are going to help your back pain anyway, but I kind of did a little bit more, like brought a little magic in. But as I was saying before, with the willow and the ogham, that was in the bathtub. So I was in the bathtub and I had the salts and things, and I brought elements of willow into the bath water. So I had willow leaves and bark probably. And the easiest way to do this, if you want to bring like herbs into the bath, is have some kind of like string bag, like a Muslim string bag, or one of like a tea strainer, and then run the water over it. So if you don't want everything floating around in the water, you can do it that way, because the water will pass through the energy. If you do want it floating in the water, then you're fine. And so then I was connecting to the energy of that ogham, that tree, that energy beyond that tree, to see where that the sovereign energy would take me. The spirit of trees is something that really fascinates me. And so working with that spirit in water was incredibly healing. And it kind of taps into this symbiotic relationship between the spirits of the land and spirits of the water all in one go. And they're obviously very intertwined in the natural world. There's no separation. Like the spirits of the land and the spirits of the water are very interconnected through nourishment, through like physical location. And so bringing that into the ritual, into the bath, and you're sort of sat in the middle of that, was incredibly empowering. And kind of like, it really does enable possession and enable connection really, really quickly. It creates that, again, like that symbiotic relationship. Like you're just a part of it. It's very difficult to put into words. I'm trying my best, but absolutely, I think it can definitely be a benefit to people to try that and really go deeper with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we see this even in Christianity, where they're making holy water, for the purpose of cleansing or driving out a demon, whatever they're trying to do. But there is a science behind that, and you as a practitioner can do this yourself, simply by making a sigil on a jar of water and putting some herbs into it, and then sitting there charging it with your intent as well as the vibration from your voice. And I definitely recommend that people experiment with doing evocation in the bathtub. Like the first time I ever underwent possession was in a bathtub full of water. And that's not where I started. I evoked the spirit, and then the spirit told me to run a bath and get in the tub. And I'm like, like, this is really weird, but I'm going to do what you're telling me. And that was the most profound experience I've ever had. It was with Belial. That was the first entity I ever successfully evoked, and that changed my entire world. So definitely try experimenting in the bathtub.
Are you saying Belial told you to take a bath? Is that what we learned today?
Exactly. He literally told me to get naked and get in the bathtub.
There you go.
But I didn't understand why at the time, but now it makes total sense, especially after studying this for a little while. So and the scrying aspect is amazing too. I think we talked about this on a previous podcast. And you touched on it again earlier, scrying into water. Just to touch on it one more time, something that I do is I'll take a black bowl full of water and put it on an altar with a black curtain behind it, and I'll put the sigil of the spirit, I'll pin that to the wall to where at the angle I'm sitting, I can see the reflection of the sigil in the water. And first I'll charge the one on paper, then I'll charge the sigil in the water. And just to kick it off extra special, I'll put a couple of drops of blood in the water and then sit there and evocation while I'm staring into the bowl of water, and you will actually see shit. Like it takes it to a whole nother level. You know, water is one of the spiritual gateways as well as blood. But when you mix those two together, it has a very profound effect on reality itself. So yeah, definitely try that too. And that I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that you want to cover in relation to water memory here?
I'm trying to think now. It's been a long day.
I mean, it's really endless to what you can do with this experimentation.
Yeah, really take it wherever you want to. Well, I mean, you could take it to other places as well. So I was just thinking, like, if you wanted to take it in terms of like wealth magic, for example, think about how long people have been throwing money into wells.
Yeah.
And wishing for things, and that's a form of magic whether they realize it or not. And you could build up a whole ritual around that idea if you wanted to, because people have been doing that for a long time. There's a whole lot of energy behind that simple action, and so it's really as boundless as you think it is. Also, I would always recommend trying ocean water versus normal water, because I think oceanic water has a different kind of memory to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fast, and it has a natural salt content anyway, so it's even closer to the way our bodies are made up. It's really close in terms of salt and water levels. So I think there's an interesting reflection of self there to be like push beyond and see what you experience in that kind of, because ocean energies as well, we don't know what's down there.
No,
it's the last place on this planet that we don't have an idea of what's fully down there. So there's that kind of mystery, that kind of we don't have complete control. You have to abandon the idea that you have complete control with ocean energies. So plus it'll kill you. You treat the energy with disrespect, treat the ocean energy with disrespect, you'll end up dead. So I think there really is a power in oceanic energy as well with water magic, and it can be a somewhat different experience, I think. But that's something I'd highly recommend.
Yeah, well, I mean, if everything that comes in contact with that water leaves an impression, and the water has a memory of that impression, then water from the ocean would be connected to everything. I mean, as far back as time goes. So I can definitely see how that would be more powerful than running some water out of the tap, to utilize in ritual. So yeah, absolutely, that's some really interesting stuff. We're almost out of time here, so I want to thank you very much for coming on and chatting with me today. It is always an honor and a pleasure to have you.
I was going to say, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to having you back in the future. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with Joey, she offers some services through becomealivinggod.com. And you also offer other services, correct, that are through your own platform. So if people want to get in touch with you, what are some of the other ways they can contact you?
I'm on most social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Facebook. Facebook is probably the easiest place to find me. It's probably easier to find the store than it is me, because however many Joey Morrises there are a ton of Joey Morrises apparently. But the store is Starry-Eyed Supplies, and you can find that pretty easily on Facebook. And if you just want to go to www.starryeyedsupplies.com, there are physical products of all varying degrees, smudges, candles, oils, anointing oils, all that sort of stuff. I do a lot of personal alchemy work for tailor-made requests, and you can get services on there too. So if you want a conduiting session or a OM reading, like we touched on earlier, you can get all that good stuff over there. So yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and you have an excellent night, Joey.
You too. Thank you very much.
Again soon. Thank you.